Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavine, it does. They need me.
End of Dragons Daily 83. It's another big one. Thank God. This is quite exciting. So anyone watching in playlist form, you would have missed out. But yesterday, there was a big studio announcement. The return of Colin Johansson, the placing of Grouch Josh Davis into kind of a new game director position for live operations. The announcement of who runs the studio, that's JT, a guy called John Taylor, who's actually been there for many years. It's not just some big NC Soft run thing that's mostly interested in the gem store. And they talked a little bit about End of Dragons. There's been a teaser for what looks like either a character or an elite specialization or both. There's been an in-game screenshot and there's been one new piece of concept art. So the next 3 parts of End of Dragons Daily are going to be highlight videos focused on those topics. I don't know which one we'll do first. I will have decided by the end of today's video. So we'll talk about that towards the end. Today I want to do kind of a general roundtable and pick some of your comments about the recent news. In fact, we might even do 2 parts on the actual meat and the text of the announcement that we just had, because I do think a lot of this is quite interesting. Now, let me be clear. The community is really pumped and really excited. I even feel very invigorated by this. It's a really nice moment that makes me feel like they're really not doing the Guild Wars 3 thing. You know, I've said many times, and let's be clear, that for all the years of Guild Wars 2's development, up until these last 2, for all the years of its development, I have believed the studio needs to go all in on the MMO and realize its potential, because there's something golden on their hands. During all that time, while I had that belief, it seems the studio didn't have that belief and wanted to do other stuff. Now, I feel like we've reversed. We've been talking a lot about the idea of like our Project Tyria in this very series. Guild Wars 3 to me in recent months hasn't looked so crazy because there is so much craft and so much difficult stuff to work out and so much damage that's been done. But over on their end, they've decided now is the time to really grab it with both hands. At least from Ruby's quote way back when on the forums, where she said, you know, End of Dragons isn't the end of the story, which could have been interpreted that the franchise goes on, the game doesn't, but I now do believe she sincerely meant Guild Wars 2. You know, all the dev posts that we've been seeing on Reddit, now this new blog post. Yeah, I think that they probably are going long term. I think a lot of that discussion about, like, will we just be swapping one MMO for another, maybe isn't on their mind. I mean, I'm sure they still have ideas for other projects, but if they're messing with like the game's graphics API going from DirectX 9 up to 11, I think that really does mean they see this the backbone of what they do and they want it to go on a long time. Back to the community, the general mood right now is incredibly elevated. People are really hyped, really excited over on the forums, over on Reddit. I've been reading a lot, and even in my own comments, I think we had over 1,000 comments in the first 12 hours of mostly people being really excited. So that's cool, and breathe that in, all right? I'm not going to deny that hype in any way, but I'm not really going to indulge in it much here. You know, I don't want to just be a hype man. I want to analyze maybe some of the other sides of the announcement, and I want to, you know, pick at comments that have, you know, maybe a slightly deeper insight or I can disagree with, or we can really pull on in some way. So look, don't let me give you the wrong impression. It's not a doom and gloom announcement. It's just, you know, we're going to be looking at some of the more critical responses. It's not all bad, but yeah, there'll be a bit more of a focus on that. Also, for the first message, this is just something from before the news dropped, which I thought was a really good idea and kind of spiraled me off, and I really wanted to share it with you guys. So this is from the previous End of Dragons Daily. Cry Hero CZ said, imagine a return of the Messart from the Mist. We were talking about where the story might go after End of Dragons. Not just Lazarus, like the last of his kind, but the whole race hidden thereafter all those catastrophes. And Metho says, would be nice. After we trash the last Elder Dragon, imagine something like the Searing with the Forgotten, the Messart, even the Marganites attacking different places and cutting off every major race from each other. I don't know whether I agree in just like the ancient races come up and they're like these big evil bad guys that wipe the slate clean. You know, you're just trying to create another Elder Dragon substitute there. That's not the bit that really captivates me. But the idea that, because let's be clear in the lore, the idea is many Messart just fled. They just ran away. They left Tyria or they kind of slipped into like a sub-dimension. The lore that was actually implemented around Arar is kind of waffly, to be honest. But they kind of ran away. So the idea might be that with the previous Rising, actually several Masat might have survived, and they might have survived out in the mists once the Elder Dragons are gone. I mean, it is so perfect and so logical and so A to B to C to say that they would now return to Tyria. And these would be a Masat that haven't, you know, withered away like maybe the ones we saw in Guild Wars 1, though they certainly still had strength. These could still be the arrogant, incredibly powerful spellcasters that you might end up feeling like you're forced to make a shady alliance with. They're the perfect kind of antagonist for this new world of storytelling after the Elder Dragons. They have these great ties to Guild Wars 1 lore, which I think would, you know, really appeal to those Guild Wars 1ers. They'd kind of correct a sin of the past, and that is how Season 3 ended with the death of Lazarus there. It's just the question of how well they can introduce this idea that there are many more Masat out there. Even though that's fine and it's not contradictory, Season 3 kind of painted it like there weren't, so I think they'd have a little bit of a struggle there. But if they get over that, this is a brilliant story, and I'll give you another reason why it's a brilliant story. Because if the Masat were to come back, remember what we were saying about the artifacts as well? Well, that immediately leads us back to Kerida/Livia, and that leads us back to the Scepter of Ore. And the Scepter of Ore is exactly one of these great artifacts, these vessels of power, that I think becomes very lucrative and interesting and thrives in the world where magic has been distributed into artifacts and among populations in that way. So it all ties together into this beautiful, beautiful picture here that I really believe in. So I think that's a great idea for where the story could go, and I'm amazed actually that we didn't talk about it before then. All right, let's get over to the new comments. A messy format, as always, from me. You should expect no less. So first we've got Life Whatsoever, who says, Colin is back! That makes me really hopeful about the future of the game. That said, it's not necessarily a good thing. I think Colin is great at generating hype, but was he a good game director? ... Some people blame him for many bad decisions around Heart of Thorns. I guess only time will tell. Personally, I'm excited. As for the delay, I think it's probably the right decision. It would be a huge mistake if they released End of Dragons in November, in my opinion. But that raises serious questions about the way they handled the Icebrood Saga finale. Why did they rush it so much? I still think they treated their fan base was disgraceful, because Jormag vs Prime Order should have been the most epic moment in the history of Guild Wars. Does it mean we'll get no content until February 2022, aside from festivals or like the Marionette? Alright, so this is a brilliant comment because it's kind of three big topics that I wanna really expand on that we didn't talk about before. Alright, let's talk about Colin as a game director and, you know, was he actually good or not? Here's the funny thing. I kind of think we don't have the answer to that question. Do you remember in yesterday's video I said, oh, if you're a fan of his work, you'll be really excited. I wanted to stop myself right there and go off on a big tangent, because what does that really mean to be a fan of his work? Like, I can cite to you various things I know he kind of did a lot of. Like when I said the bonus mission pack thing, I think as far as I remember, it was really only one of those bonus mission pack missions. It was the Master Togo one in the mountains, which was kind of based on Kill Bill. And, you know, I kind of know that as a bit of trivia. But do any of us really know, even if you work in the industry, do you know how they work as a team? Do you know what individuals' contributions really come down to? And how do we really compare stuff like that, or building like, you know, a quest in Guild Wars 1 pre-searing to create Gwen? How do you compare that to someone's work in a more managerial role? And then even at that point, okay, you got to remember what he's doing at the studio now is different to during Heart of Thorns. Sure, he was game director during Heart of Thorns. Back then, my impression of the role was that yes, it was someone who kind of helped to guide where the game was going, but it was also something of like a bridge between the development teams and the community. Like, that was one of the big parts of what they were doing. Does that mean that Colin had absolute immaculate say on every single thing that Heart of Thorns did and needs to bear the blame of everything that Heart of Thorns did? I've seen people blaming him for the content drought before Heart of Thorns, for the one after it, for their fixation on raids after it, for all this like crazy stuff. And I don't know whether any of us are really in a position to say that. What we can say is that back then he was not calling all the shots. There were people above him. Sometimes, maybe even a lot of times, he's going to hear the word no. This time, that's not necessarily true. It's him and JT at the top. So unless we learn it, and this is one thing I wish the blog post went into more of, honestly, and it's funny, I haven't seen many comments about this. Unless we hear more about NCSoft's interaction with the studio, I think we can pretty safely say that wherever he might have been halted before, and whatever issues might have occurred during Heart of Thorns, might not occur again, if you want to be the optimist here. But I kind of hate this whole conversation, because, you know, everyone is so ignorant on the topic. They really are. I don't believe in this, like, developer celebrity thing. I think it's a really bad idea. When Colin left, I said, well, it might not matter much. We don't know. And many people might have looked at me there and said, oh, he's just trying to, you know, hold the ship down. He's just trying to preserve hype or whatever. No, it's because I really believe in the logic of that. To have any kind of integrity, I have to say the same thing now that he's back. I mean, unless I change my mind. We are obviously talking about over half a decade of opinions developing, but I do still feel the same. You got to remember as well, being a game director on Guild Wars 2 doesn't necessarily mean you can stop it if the studio wants to take a ton of people to go work on another game that ultimately gets cancelled in 2017 with mass layoffs, right? But yeah, that interaction with NCSoft I do find to be an interesting one. They're often painted as the boogeyman. I think, you know, publishers always are in the games industry. But on the other hand, I remember for many, many, many years, particularly during the development of Guild Wars 2, ArenaNet was always very, very praising of NCSoft, of how hands-off they were, and it felt like there was like a really, really good cooperation going on. And then we just kind of don't hear anything. Has that changed? Has that toxified? Who can say? The blog post certainly didn't. Let's talk about the second half of this, the Chormag v Primordus stuff. Now, this is interesting, all right? Am I crazy? But in a way, I appreciate everything that's great about the delay. I'm 99% in the camp the delay is a good thing, particularly because, as many of you guys commented on, I didn't before, but Final Fantasy XIV is having an expansion in November, as far as I remember is the exact date. That game has been on a consistent high and is blowing up massively for the past like 2.5, 3 years. Like, it's nuts. And we are in a place where Guild Wars 2 needs to be scared of it. Just as Guild Wars 2 had to be scared of World of Warcraft stuff. You guys remember when Blizzard would shift their release dates around to be careful of Guild Wars 2's launch? I certainly do. Anyway, we're in a different world now, and yeah, I think that this is another reason why that delay may have happened. I think that I've read some very cynical people saying, oh, it's not that they want to improve it, it's just a marketing thing to avoid Final Fantasy. You know, it can be both. It can be that they want it to be as good as possible and they want the extra time so that they can do big features like playable Tengu or whatever we currently believe is impossible. And it's because they know that it's a very, very crowded space in the market at that point. It can be multiple things. However, so I'm good with all of that, but I have to say, I mean, how recent was this decision for this delay? Because we really will be sitting in a place now where it feels like the whole thing for Champions, not just the final chapter of Champions, because I've already discussed with you guys, I think all of Champions was botched with the way that it was done. They have given us the worst story patch they have ever done. They have ruined what the entire franchise is predicated on at the moment with the Jormag v Primordus thing in a rushed release that now looks, I mean, I already criticized that it was weird for them to already be focusing on something like the Marionette, you know, just push it back. Now looks even more absurd, considering the expansion itself might not even be out for like a year after the final Champions release. I mean, really, it could be about a year. Let's say early 2022 is what they're saying, right? Let's say they push that to the very end of the window, April. So this gap is just like kind of crazy to me. Do you know what I would really love? Some people have been asking about interim content. I'm actually surprised very few people have been asking about what will be the interim content. I guess most people are just happy about like alliances and the DirectX stuff. But I honestly think, and I know that they rushed it so that they could all go on to End of Dragons. I get it. It's a game of resources and that's a game we can't comment on because we're not there. But I honestly feel like some amazing interim content would be like Champions Redux or something, where they just go back and do lore housekeeping on that patch to make it feel a little bit better in whatever way they see fit. Not everyone's going to share that priority with me, but man, if that was like a December release or something, that would make me very happy. I just feel so bad about what happened to Primordus. And you can, in theory, fix it in this kind of media. You can go back. Who would be mad at a retcon like that, really? Just because a few months after the patch, they go back and clean it up and expand it and make it feel better. Anyway, just some ramblings. I'm a madman there. Banjo has a weird one here. Ruby swapping attunements and Colin and his renewed focus. You're right to not draw attention to these puns. Yeah, I did kind of get those a little bit. I don't know whether they're really hinting at anything specific. I think they're just throwing a lot of franchise references around. You know, like some of the subheaders, I never read them on yesterday's video, but one was like Choo Choo, you know, they're referencing the hype train image macro that was being posted constantly around Heart of Thorns and has already resurfaced. I mean, what are we saying? That Guardian is going to get achievements in the next X-Pack? Or that Ellie is going to be getting meditations or something? I mean, neither of these are really anything to grip onto. And even the idea of a Guardian getting attunements, let's be real, that's exactly what tomes feel like, and I don't think is what they'd be going for anyway. Next, we've got If someone's got an idea there, let me have it. Next, we've got Hikari Knight, who says they're most likely going for DirectX 11 to still support Windows 7 and newer, while DirectX 12 is only on 10 and newer. That's a good point. I think you have to be very careful about this stuff. You would literally alienate and slash certain members of your population if you did this. I didn't actually know about that limitation. They also said, as a side note, it's easier to translate 11 to Vulkan using DXVK for playing games in Linux and Wine or Proton than translating DirectX 12. Well, they didn't talk about Vulkan. I mean, look, if we're in a new era where they're really looking to support Guild Wars 2 for a whole decade following, maybe this kind of stuff is also on their mind. I'm personally not that confident that's really what they're aiming for. I'll say as well, a lot of people talked about the Mac client being discontinued and like now they can focus on this kind of stuff. You have to remember, ArenaNet didn't actively decide really to discontinue Mac. It was Apple who said, yeah, we're breaking everything and we're doing our own thing and you have to put all the dev time in to catch back up with us. And a lot of developers at that time just said, no, we're not going to do it. So that was really something more on Apple's end than anything else. And I've seen a lot of weird information about that. Another message here about DirectX 11 teaching me stuff. Hungry for Apples says DirectX 12 is very tricky to implement properly compared to DirectX 11. There's no reason to add more work on top of the immense tasks that they have. 12 doesn't make stuff magically run faster or better compared to 11. It's a tool for those who want to squeeze every bit of performance from the hardware and want to deal with very low-level concepts. A lot of DirectX 12 implementation in games so far see no improvements benefits, and some of them actually perform worse than 11. And those who do see a performance improvement, it's barely noticeable. If you think of 11 as using Lego pieces to build your renderer, 12 would be the equivalent of making the actual plastic, pouring it into molds, and making your own custom Lego pieces first. I love an analogy like this. Brilliant. That helps me to understand it. And yeah, this does seem like one of those situations where we, the ignorant consumers, see a higher number. Oh, DirectX 12, it's definitely better. And even, you know, read a little bit of the press and the marketing about it itself. And we just assume that it's great, but when you actually get out there in the industry, a lot of the time the improvements aren't worth the cost of the work. So yeah, I've read that a lot, that 9 to 11 really shouldn't be too bad. And if this is also true, that a lot of the time, a lot of DirectX 12 games don't even see massive gains over if they had been on 11, I think that ArenaNet would have done well to analyze that and go for 11. I mean, who am I to say? Here's another sentiment about DirectX I see constantly. Music Passer says, instead of ignoring the game performance since release, they could have done an upgrade to DirectX 11 earlier. Earlier spelt wrong. It's the reason I quit the game in 2014. If they would ban Teapot for doubling his legendaries and Enco for his third-party trading platform, I'd 100% agree to come back with some old Guild Wars 1 fans. Well, I don't know about the second half of that, but as for the idea that they had to do it years and years and years ago, I keep seeing this idea basically saying too little, too late. And it's very strange, especially with the idea of graphics and game performance, because to me it's like, all right, the game was running badly for you in 2014. You do realize it's been like 8 years since then. The vast proportion of a decade since then, and you haven't upgraded your hardware, and it's still on them, is it? I mean, to a certain degree it is on them, but it's been really crazy. I've seen so many people with messages like this where they really talk about Guild Wars 2 like it's terribly optimized. And that blows my mind because it's not terribly optimized. Some of the new Living World maps, definitely. And if you spend all your time with absolutely zero culling on in World versus World and at World bosses, yeah, it will kill your performance. But even fairly mediocre rigs can get a solid 60 FPS. And this constantly, to me, comes down to the way that consumers treat option menus in games. They always see Ultra, always go for it, and then it's the game's fault when they're getting bad performance. What I think studios need to be is a lot more savvy and careful about exactly how much freedom they give players, because people will use that freedom, like we see in Guild Wars 2 with the culling settings, get miserable and slap it back in your own face. In any case, I don't think it's too little too late. I never really believed in that, not if we're going to a new era of the game, for sure. Speaking of old players, I had a bunch of people saying stuff like this. BA. I'm one of the OG players who you talked about in yesterday's video. I've been around since before Prophecies was Prophecies. So what he means there is, it was originally just Guild Wars. They only needed the subtitle once Factions came out and they wanted to differentiate it. In fact, it might have only been when Nightfall came out they needed the subtitle. Because if it was just 2, it was Factions and just regular Guild Wars. In any case, the game has been bleh for me for many years, and the announcement of Colin coming back is kind of cool, but to be honest, I probably won't ever come back to the Guild Wars universe beyond watching WP videos and occasionally logging in to the 2 games to collect birthday prezzies. WP makes Guild Wars better than ArenaNet does, Shug. I know he's a Guild Wars 1 player, specifically because of that birthday prezzy thing. That's not really a thing in the Guild Wars 2 culture, I'd say. I mean, maybe slightly it is, but it's kind of a different world with the way that they handled minis. So look, I've seen a few people saying this. I think what's really happened here is something that people are advising to be cautious of. A blog post like yesterday is a lot of hype and less substance. You know, they say they want to communicate more, but we don't really get a great sense of exactly what form that will take. You know, when I look at other game franchises that I'm big fans of and I see the way that they communicate regularly, I want to see ArenaNet commit to initiatives like those. And it is weird on the communication front as well. People talk so much about how communication is bad and that during the Mo era, you know, they never talked and the whole surprise and delight thing. Well, let's not be revisionist here. For a good chunk of the Mo era, like a really good long chunk, communication was better than this franchise has ever been because they did the regular AMAs over on Reddit. They had the whole studio get together to talk fervently and tangibly about lots and lots of releases. What closed all that down was the Jessica Price stuff, and then they became, you know, fearful of the community and what being that open would feel like. And really, it's only been through the second half of Season 4 and the Icebrood Saga, which I know in terms of real time is a long time, but in terms of actual releases and what the company's been doing, a huge proportion of that whole Mo era was very, very, very big on communication. In this post, I don't see them saying, oh, we're bringing the AMAs back, for example. Not that I think the AMAs are the be-all and end-all and the best thing to do, but just as an example. So I think it's tangibles like that, and particularly with game direction, you know, what they actually want to do, that will impress comments like this. I saw a lot of people typing like BA here, and they say, oh, I'm not that excited. And I can understand why. Oh, man, we're already at 20 minutes. I've got so many comments here. Well, look, on another note, it's kind of adjacent to that. On my next comment here, we've got Ashton C., who I think has quite a good insight. Who said, they pivoted from their Icebrood Saga plans to get End of Dragons out the door. And this post sounds a lot like there's been yet another pivot post-restructure. The style of the post even comes across like some of those old Colin-era update posts full of promises and fluff. So I'm taking all of this entirely with a grain of salt. Now, here's what I think they've very accurately said. Talk is cheap, and ArenaNet has been historically fickle with Guild Wars 2's priorities. So we'll have to see if they can actually deliver and deliver consistently. That is a wonderful phrase. I think I'm going to steal that. Fickle with Guild Wars 2's priorities. That expresses perfectly, really, I think, where the problems of the studio have been. That they'll have great ideas. Like, say, when Heart of Thorns is really the center of the storm for a lot of this stuff, like a ton of guild stuff, it will go in the game, and then it gets deprioritized. World versus a World alliances being confirmed to actually come. Why is that exciting to people? Because this has been another, you know, victim of their fickle priorities. This has been one of those situations where they've had an idea, they've announced it to people, so it's even got far enough to that, and then it's been deprioritized. What I really want to see for this new era is stable ideas about what they believe should be consistent content. That's where the other MMOs beat them. They don't beat them in quality. They don't beat them in quantity even. Maybe, obviously, in this past year, during the pandemic and with Icebrood Saga, we can definitely say that. But generally speaking, Guild Wars and ArenaNet have done more and done a higher bar. But because it's been all over the shop and because people haven't learned to trust any of it, I think it's fallen down. So that's what the new leadership really needs to analyze, and it might take them a while before they can, you know, figure that out and then come to us in a blog post with it. But that's what I want to see. And, you know, cornerstones of that isn't just looking at World versus World, which kind of was a tangible they gave us, but, you know, like actually committing and being clear with people, hey, we're going to do bi-yearly expansions, or we're going to do 3-yearly expansions, whatever they can actually do. But this is actually a thing. It's not, oh, there's a new expansion. Is this going to be the last one ever? Every single time. They actually have these pieces in place. And then what do they support in those expansions? What do they support through live? Those are the big questions. That's the kind of communication that I really think tangibly needs to come out. And at that point, hopefully, you won't have people saying, oh, talk is cheap. Because, yeah, it does come across a little bit fluffy. There you go, guys. That's today's End of Dragons Daily. This is the kind of stuff that's going through my mind. I think the things that are really worth talking about. I really want your takes on this stuff. So drop me comments. We'll do one more video in this format before I then ask for stuff about the screenshot and about the elite specialization or character teaser, whatever it is. So just any kind of response you have down below, I'll be lurking in the comments very, very closely. Thanks so much for supporting the video yesterday. Please do continue to support this series as well. I'm feeling very invigorated, and hopefully that turns into more stuff for you coming up. Again, I've already got 2 other videos kind of on the side, which I'm waiting to push for you. One of them is about graphics and optimization, which I now think is perfectly timed, because if we're going to DirectX 11 by the end of the year, a lot of what I say may not end up mattering anymore. So it will be a nice thing to kind of underline this era of what it means to have good graphics settings and teach you guys a lot about that. So thanks, guys. I'm rambling too much. Take care now, and I'll see you in the next one very soon.